Oregon nearly put up 70 points against a Power 4 school. So Penn State's got to be more concerned, right? Right?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is right. You are locked on to Penn State football in this crossover edition. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Brian Smith, host of The Portal, also Locked On Seminoles. He is the recruiting expert on the Locked On Podcast Network, but just a college football expert in general. As we are talking about Oregon's decimation of Oklahoma State and how it affects this matchup with Penn State coming up. But Penn State recruiting news with not only Tavian Branch committing to the class of 2026, coveted defensive tackle, so we're going to get Brian's breakdown of this commitment, but also the top quarterback prospect in the class of 2027, according to 24/7, is set to visit Penn State, and that is the only Big Ten school that he is visiting out of his 6 visits in total for this upcoming season. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Brian, let's start with Penn State and Oregon first, because Oregon's offense looks unstoppable. To put up nearly 70 points against a Power 4 team, I don't care who it is. I mean, Oklahoma State's definitely not going to have the best season here. But to win 69-3, Mike Gundy and everybody else is going to have to answer that. But now my expectations have significantly changed for how this Penn State-Oregon matchup is going to play out in just a couple of weeks here.
Yeah, I think that Oregon has taken it up a notch. They're on a kind of a mission. The question was obviously Dante Moore. And we just didn't know because he didn't really play last year. I had him as my number 1 overall player in 2023, and it's 3 years removed as far as seasons go from him graduating high school. I think he's going to take that step. Obviously, they have a ton of speed. They got a ton of defensive talent. But I think it's the mentality. Like, they wanted to surgically disassemble Oklahoma State. I'm sure part of it was the Gundy comments and all that. And Dan Lanning is a prickly guy. Like he doesn't have very good faith in what other people say. Like he uses it against them. Probably help motivate his team too. But that's okay. I mean, they went out there, they won fair and square, and it just seemed like every other play, Oklahoma State was just getting bludgeoned. And then when they were getting bludgeoned, somebody was running around them that was a lot faster than Oklahoma State. It was a message. And I think right now, if I had to pick one team that's based on their first 2 weeks, who's the best team in college football, it would be Oregon, just on performance. But there's a long way to go, and we'll see once they hit a little more competition. Obviously, the Penn State game being the point of that.
So speak to Dante Moore a little more here, because I actually thought that Moore's I never had really doubts with him. Did I think that Oregon's offense was a work in progress and that the best version of this team was further down the road in the second half of the season? Yes, but I never doubted Dante Moore as a starter and what kind of caliber quarterback he could be. I just think better days were ahead later on in the season and not necessarily this early, especially when you deal with some injuries early on to the pass catchers, because Dante Moore had that chance to kind of go through the fire of it all with Chip Kelly and the mess up, the dumpster fire that was at UCLA at that point in time, and which is still going on now, just with a different quarterback and a different coach. But he kind of went through that adversity, then took a step backwards to sit behind a seasoned veteran in Dylan Gabriel and just kind of learn, observe, and go through all of that. It's not like bringing in a transfer quarterback now where they have to build chemistry, learn a system. Will Stein and Dante Moore have been working together for the past 2 years, going into year 2 together. And I think that's the advantage that Oregon has, that kind of like Penn State, where it's that consistency and that's continuity. It's not that newness that you have trying to bring in a quarterback who just hasn't run your system or played with this core of players.
Yeah, I think having the second go round with a coach, for a lot of guys, it clicks. So that's a very poignant point there for you to bring up about Dante with Will Stein, and Stein can coach. I think last year kind of showed
He'll be a head coach soon enough. Yeah.
I think after this year, there's a chance somebody will. He's young. He is young, but depending on what level he's willing to go, that just throw it out there. This will be a big year in college football for coaches. He might go up an extra level. I don't know if he'll be ready for that, but
yeah.
who knows? He could be in Texas or Ohio or anywhere else next year, not Oregon. But the point is still the same. Dante took a big step up. We didn't really hear much about him last year because we didn't have to. Dylan Gabriel obviously took care of that. I just think that he's more dynamic. When I got to know him when he was in high school, every school in the country recruited him out of Martin Luther King in Detroit. Very cerebral kid, elite academic student, leader, nicest guy you'd meet. But he took no prisoners at throwing the football, and he was pretty good at post-snap reads for a young guy, and that's why I liked him. He was awesome at Elite 11 out in L.A. I thought he was the best player there, and that's like myself and several other people thought, okay, if it's not this guy, it's this guy, whatever. I just said Dante's been the most consistent on the field, Elite 11, et cetera, and he's the kind of person you want as the face of your program. That's a big part of like quarterbacks getting ranked high. Like it's different with your demeanor. You can be the crazy guy and be the defensive tackle. You can't be that guy as the quarterback. And Dante fits it. So all those things make me think that he's just comfortable in this role. Like the publicity and all that will not bother him. Like as crazy it may sound, and Penn State's arguably the toughest place to play in college football, I don't think that'll bother him like it would most kids. Now, it's going to have an impact, but he'll run right through that, and he can block out the noise because he's been a recruit since he was in 8th grade. So this is a rare recruit. He'll play in the NFL for a long time. So Penn State's defense will be challenged.
Now, let me temper the reaction to this Oklahoma State game just a little bit, because 69 points is 69 points. Don't get me wrong. However, Oklahoma State is not your father's Oklahoma State, or is not. It's not our Oklahoma State. You know, watching all those air raid. Yeah, exactly. Mike Gundy is definitely not the answer anymore.
He's getting fired.
Yeah. So there's that. Also, just unfortunate circumstances. They had a pretty high upside quarterback going into this season, a lot of potential, and he gets injured in week 1, and he's either out long term or for the entire season. So Oregon kind of gets Oklahoma State at its weakest point, so to speak. I'm not saying that I don't want to take all that away from their victory, but just remember that Oklahoma State isn't this team that's competing for a Big 12 title here. They're probably going to finish last in the Big 12. And if you added a few more other teams I'm sure some group of 6 teams could probably beat this Oklahoma State team. With that being said, I do think this Penn State-Oregon matchup is going to be a lot closer than I initially anticipated. I really did think that Penn State was going to win this one decisively. I'm talking, hey, comfortably. They just need to run out the clock. Maybe they even win by double digits. To now, this might come down to a field goal on either side. I am still confident because, hey, it's at Beaver Stadium. It's a whiteout that Penn State still has the overall advantage. But now, Brian, this matchup definitely changes where, again, Dante Moore doesn't seem to any sort of rust, and DeCorian Moore has already emerged as an impact freshman despite the loss of Evan Stewart. Now it's the defense that I think Oregon's defense needs to prove a little bit more, since they haven't been truly tested here. I mean, neither has Penn State, but they have a lot more changes to deal with in the back half of the defense in particular, that I want to see them go up against a comparable opponent like a Penn State.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's nothing you can do about who you play, but go out there and stomp them. The speed and everything for Oregon will be on display. They got plenty of that. But can they slow down Penn State's outside zone and inside zone? As boring as that is, that's a pretty boring conversation. That's the most important conversation as far as who wins, though. Oregon is one of, if not the deepest team in the country on the D-line, other than maybe Georgia. It's debatable, but they haven't played anybody like Penn State's O-line, who's certainly up for the Joe Moore Award. Yeah. So I would imagine that this game will still come down to the trenches for the most part. The only thing I'll add to that is like the top 4 receivers right now for Oregon, Gary Bryant Jr., Jeremiah McClellan, DeCorian Moore, and Malik Benson are all track guys. Penn State has to be able to get pressure with 4 a lot, which is going to be hard against Oregon's line. That could be the other thing, because they got a lot of talent. And Dante's not afraid to throw in the middle of the field. That'll be a fascinating part. I can't wait for the game because of that.
Kenyon, you mentioned the middle of the field, Kenyon Sadiq immediately.
That's the other one. I was just talking about the speed, but then Sadiq, he's a tight end, but he's so freaky athletic. He's really a big receiver. Like he's going to play in the NFL a long time. So that group of quote unquote weapons gives them a chance to win the title this year. But Penn State's going to catch him pretty early in the year. if I'm Penn State, I'd much rather play Oregon early season as opposed to mid of November.
Yep.
I just Moore won't have as many reps. And on top of that, again, it's in Beaver Stadium. I still think you should favor Penn State in that game. If I don't know what the odds makers will put it at once the game gets there, but I'm guessing they're favored 3 to 5 points, Penn State. And on top of that, again, you got the veteran quarterback and everything. So a lot of little sub points that make that game a lot of fun.
Well, it'll be here before we know it, but I think this matchup is important to talk about because Penn State has to play an FCS opponent leading up here, and we've just seen Oregon's offense explode for nearly 70 points. So it is worth talking about since this is the pivotal matchup that really makes or breaks, I think, Penn State's season in my mind, because if they lose that game, it changes everything going forward. So let's bring it to recruiting now. Penn State, this was a headline that flew under the radar because Penn State was in the middle of a football game, but the Nittany Lions pick up a coveted defensive tackle that we talked about as one of the top flip targets in the offseason after he committed to Rutgers. Tavian Branch joins Penn State's class of 2026. What to like about him next is coming up here on this Locked On Crossover. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride. With more IIH Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda. Move and be moved. And this episode is also brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Now let's break it down. So for Penn State, we're going to go with Devontae Ross this week. Wide receiver again. Kyron Hudson and Trevor Pena originally impressed. Now it's Devontae Ross with his immediate impact after being worked into the lineup progressively, dealing with some offseason injuries, and then right out of the gate, as soon as his role increases, he has a big touchdown reception from Drew Aller. So when the pressure was on, Ross came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been following week after week, you know that this performance was not a fluke. And just like Ross delivered for Penn State, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you can save every Saturday you order and stack it up all season. You could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period goes through November 18th. Tavian Branch commits to Penn State, and it seems like he's going to be locked in just based on interactions between James Franklin and Branch after Saturday's win against FIU, how he's been acting on social media here. This was something, again, we didn't understand it, why he was committed to Rutgers. I do want to point back to, Brian, you and I had this discourse that I don't think Penn State was consistently sold on the idea of him as a defensive tackle, and now they are. And maybe they were for a while, but then they kind of had to break that relationship or just kind of continue to chip away at that relationship with Rutgers. But all of that aside, this guy is going to be a defensive tackle. There's no more questions. Okay, is he an offensive lineman? Is he a tackle? He's going to be a one-tech defensive tackle because he's listed at 6'3", 300 pounds. In theory, Penn State could have him cut the weight to be that 3 technique, but I think either way, you have the versatility to where you could play him at either defensive tackle spot. And I like what Branch did, just being confident in himself, saying that I am a defensive tackle. I know I'm a defensive tackle, and I'll just let the film prove it. And then eventually Penn State caught up to it. So I'm glad it all worked out here because Penn State, as we said, did need another defensive lineman in this class.
He's got really good foot speed off the line. I'm a little surprised that he wasn't recruited more. Being a PA guy, I'm not sure what the holdup was. Maybe it's the arm length or something like that. I don't know. He looks pretty normal to me, but his first step is his biggest asset, and he plays hard. I think Penn State's defense deserves credit year after year, no matter who the coordinator has been. James Franklin's crew gets to the football, they rally. This kid will fit in with that culture. And again, it's an in-state player, if at all possible. If you're going to take a flyer on a guy, you'd prefer it be local. Those kind of kids kind of rally around for the state. I think it's a win for Penn State in a lot of different ways. And 300 pounds, by the way, never goes out of style.
So I made the immediate player comparison to the likes of Alonzo Ford, where don't assume that Branch is going to be a space eater, if you will, just a run stopper. I do think this is a guy that can be a 3-down player, but he is going to have to maintain that weight. I think that's why maybe Penn State was initially maybe a little cautious with, let's leave the option on the table for him to be an offensive lineman before they said, okay, full-fledged, this guy is a defensive tackle, because you are going to have to maintain that amount of athleticism. Penn State isn't going to say, let's bulk him up to 320, 330, because they're not looking for a nose tackle. They are looking for 3-down players.
I think that he's going to fit it pretty well, because he can chase the quarterback. He can change directions. There's a couple of different clips on his film where he's kind of like snaking after the kid. The guy's trying to get away and he's moving all over. And he hung with a guy that weighed probably 75 to 100 pounds less than him. So I'm like, that's a good athlete. I'm not sure if he's wrestled, if he's been in track or whatever, but his lateral movements for a big fella are very impressive. So those are the guys that can play nose guard. They can play center. They can play guard, whatever you want. It's not going to matter. They're just good football players. And I think Penn State, since they run such an aggressive scheme, which fits him because he's a one gap and go guy, I don't see why he couldn't play as a sophomore.
Yeah, and especially if he enrolls early. Penn State,
Sure.
Penn State is, though, proving my doubts wrong at defensive tackle. So I buy into the fact that Tavian Branch can compete to play sooner rather than later. But let's look at the defensive tackle spot overall, because, Brian, you and I discussed it. I discussed it at length that, hey, Penn State is just unproven at defensive tackle. I'm not sure what there is after Zane Durant, and now Alonzo Ford is coming back from injury. And they add Ty Blanding, who is continuing to play more. Brian, I think you probably remember Eni White very well, because he was a 5-star defense, or just a top 50. I don't know if he was actually a consensus top or 5-star, but he was a top 50 prospect and one of the top prospects in Pennsylvania when he committed to Texas A&M. He's now at defensive tackle for Penn State, so he would be back there. But that group does get they'll lose Zane Durant at some point. They'll lose Eni White and Alonzo Ford. So eventually Penn State will go back to that reset. And so that's why they're kind of loading up here with Alex Haskell, who we are both very high on. Now you add in Tavian Branch, Isaac Chukara, who's been flying under the radar. It just kind of goes to show that Deion Barnes is able to identify those diamonds in the rough, if you will, and then secure their commitment.
I think that that's one of the keys to programs like Penn State who want to have a certain kind of culture and not just buy a bunch of D tackles. You got to be able to evaluate very well. And it also helps to be close to Philadelphia and South Jersey and Baltimore, et cetera. There are a lot of good football programs all over just Maryland that always seem to have defensive linemen. I don't know what it is about Maryland. Penn State raids those states well, and then occasionally they'll grab a kid from Virginia or a kid from Ohio. I forget the kid's name, the defensive end that's tearing it up already, the freshman. He's an Ohio kid.
Yep.
Yeah, Ohio State, I don't think they really recruited him. So Penn State has found the under-the-radar guys, and it's changed their football program.
And that's what we're going to discuss primarily going into segment 3, is that's how Penn State has had to operate. But I think that's going to change pretty soon, and we're already kind of seeing it reflected in the latest headlines with the top quarterback. We're talking number 1 overall in the class of 2027, according to 24/7, Elijah Haven. It's a long way to go before Penn State possibly secures a commitment, but there is this one unique note about his recruitment that seems to benefit Penn State in this discourse. We're going to talk about that next here on this Locked On Crossover. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app, whether it is NFL football, college football as well, all the other available sports. FanDuel makes every game more exciting. So whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, it's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays and your Saturdays as well. If you're looking at Penn State football games, Penn State, you want to get a head start on Penn State versus Oregon. Well, that is right. Lines are available for that Penn State-Oregon game since we've been talking about it so much here recently. Penn State is still the favorite, according to FanDuel. 4.5 points in favor of the Nittany Lions, minus 172 on the money line, plus 142. If you're thinking about Oregon, the total is set at 53.5. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use over at FanDuel. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts and even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is definitely for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts and minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel like you are in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You can maximize your investments, increase your savings rate, easily review finances with your partner or a financial advisor, which allows you to keep a clear view of your financial health week to week, long term, no matter what. Don't let this financial offer slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year over at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Elijah Haven, industry 5-star. Now, Rivals does have him within the top 100. He is not the number one quarterback according to Rivals, but ESPN 24/7, they say he is the guy at QB. We're also going to talk about Keegan Croucher in this instance because, Brian, if you had to choose one, you're not entirely sold on Elijah Haven being that bona fide number one QB, but you still think he is a really talented prospect. So I'm eager to know which one, hey, who should Penn State prefer, Croucher or Haven? But here's what's interesting about Haven's recruitment to this point, is that Penn State is the only Big Ten school that is getting a visit for this football season. The rest of them are SEC schools. So I'm surprised that, I know that Michigan has a quarterback. I know that Ohio State, I know that Notre Dame have their quarterback commits, but nobody else from the Big Ten or nobody else up north. It's all SEC schools that are getting his attention. And then it's Penn State. And there's, I think, a reason for that. I think Penn State made a statement with this deal with Adidas. This is the game that you have to play now in college sports, particularly for football, but just overall in athletics, where you have to find a way to build up your war chest. So that NIL isn't, well, we got to negotiate and try to get them to take a pay cut. So then that way you can just focus on the conversation, how you fit in with the program and how we can develop you. What is your long-term outlook instead of trying to negotiate and debate what the dollars are going to look like? Penn State's going to have that handled now with this Adidas deal, and that's why you're already starting to see that, oh wow, Penn State has the attention of the number one quarterback in 2027.
Yeah, Elijah Haven's a great kid, goes to the Dunham School in Baton Rouge. You would assume LSU will be involved. I'm sure they will be.
Oh, yeah.
But he's a kid he's the kind of guy that can go wherever. He's been raised right, very respectful guy. Got nice size, and he has the frame to weigh 230, no problem. He's probably 215-ish right now, if I was to guess. Just seen him recently. Mm-hmm. But pocket passer that will move when he needs to. I think he's probably the guy that's best to find is somebody that will extend plays more than he will go make plays. But he's accurate, and he's consistent, throws on time. As far as him or Keegan Croucher, I saw him same event. I don't know which one's better at this point, because you're seeing guys in street clothes, but they both throw the ball accurately and on time. The only question that I really have about Haven is, for whatever reason, he seems to throw at the same velocity, whether it's short, long, or whatever. I'd like to see him zip it more often, but we were at a camp. So not seeing him play live competition, it's a little bit different. Need to see how he handles getting hit. How does he react to an interception, etc. But some people think he's the next guy up. And like, if he walks up to you, he fits the profile in terms of the frame. That's what it's supposed to look like. It's not quite Bryce Underwood, but you get the point. It's a big kid, big, long, lanky kid that's athletic. He's already put on some good muscle, and he's got 2 years of high school he's still working with. So he's probably going to go somewhere and play pretty early. I just need to see the more zip when he needs to do it. Otherwise, like that's a really good prospect.
These are the visits that he has lined up for this season. He's going to LSU first. I mean, go figure, right? That's its backyard. That's the LSU Florida game, and I know Florida is trending in the way wrong direction, but that's still going to be a good game. He's actually going to be in attendance for the whiteout against Oregon, which we already talked about a lot in this show. He's going to see Florida versus Texas, so Florida still is in the running, despite Billy Napier and employment questions. He's going to go to Alabama and Tennessee, Georgia and Texas, Auburn and Alabama. So the 6 schools that seem to stand out at this point: Penn State, LSU, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn. We both agree that LSU is probably going to be the strongest player for obvious geographical reasons here. They need a 2027 quarterback. I mean, I wouldn't count out any of these SEC schools. Like I said, it is really interesting to me, Brian, that Penn State, there's no USC, there's no Oregon. Keegan Croucher, though, so let's bring him back into this conversation, because now Penn State's gone from it's Keegan Croucher or bust in the class of 2027 to you do have multiple elite options here after missing out initially on Teddy Gerard, for example. And at one point in time, Penn State was pursuing Michigan commit Peter Bork. So after they missed out on 2 priority targets for the class of 2027, they also offered Brady Edmonds, who committed to Ohio State, but I don't think Penn State was strongly in that recruitment whatsoever because he made his decision to commit to the Buckeyes fairly early. Penn State, one by one, was missing out top quarterback. And then, okay, Keegan Croucher seems to be the remaining best of the bunch that's realistic, but then there's Elijah Haven. So with Keemon Spell already committed to the class of 2027, and I know that we've discussed, hey, could he flip? Is he going to decommit? Obviously, my confidence is a little lower in him staying with Penn State's class, but he's still committed to this point in time. He's not committed somewhere else. He's committed to Penn State, so that means Penn State has the lead until they don't. You also have an elite wide receiver in Khalil Taylor, who could be a 5-star. He's regressed a little bit. He's a solid 4-star, but he could make his way back into that 5-star conversation. You add a prospect like Croucher or Haven, who at the end of the day could both be 5-star quarterbacks when the rankings are finalized. Penn State's class of 2027. Who cares about 2026? 2027 picks up all of the slack that if you have any doubts about 2026, 2027 rights all of those wrongs.
Yeah, it's a great start for Penn State. I've said it for a long time. You have to get in on kids early. You have to offer early. You got to get them to campus early, and you got to build relationships early. Penn State's done all that stuff for a few years. But for whatever reason, it's really caught fire with the 27 class. I don't know what the difference in the elixir is, but Penn State found it. So good for them. I think that it's great that they're also expanding a little bit. Elijah Haven, among others. It's not often that Louisiana is a priority state for the Penn State Nittany Lions. I don't know if they've ever signed anybody from there in my lifetime. They don't really recruit it, but the point is still the same. They're going wherever they need to find elite talent while keeping the main players, by and large, inside the Keystone State. That's the perfect formula, and that's the one that even Joe Paterno used back in the day for the Nittany Lions. So they'll have a top 10 class. It's too early to project much more than that, but it's pretty obvious they're going to have a top 10 class in 27.
Brian, here's what is also really, really interesting at this point in time is that Penn State has not officially offered him. He has a visit, but there is no listed official offer for Elijah Haven and the Penn State Nittany Lions. So that's, I still here, as we sit here today, and things could completely change, I still think the priority is Keegan Croucher, but Penn State is hedging its recruiting bets, so to speak. And how could you not? If the number one quarterback in the country is going to say, yeah, I'll give you a visit. Yeah, I'll give you a chance to recruit me. you have that conversation. But I still think the QB spotlight, so to speak, is on, if we're looking at a realistic outcome, it's Keegan Croucher.
Yeah, he's the Northeast kid. It's the safer pick. I mean, geographics do matter. That's probably one of the reasons that they haven't offered Haven yet. They want to see if he's willing to really go, like, how does he react? How does he fit in? Which is smart for all parties involved. I'm curious to see if they offer him when he comes for the whiteout. If Croucher, I don't know if he'll be at that same game or not. I would assume he is, but I don't know how their schedule works out. Some of those schools play on Saturday up there in the Northeast, but that's a great opportunity for Haven to find out, hey, can I really survive up there? Do I like that kind of stuff? Do I want to be at this school? He may get an offer that weekend, which would make Penn State recruiting all the more interesting, to be really honest.
Just to confirm, Croucher is not visiting for the whiteout game. He is slated to visit for Penn State, Indiana later on in the season. So he's actually going to, he'll be at another school for another game. So, but Croucher there is not a conflict of interest for Penn State in this QB recruitment here. So, all the attention when it comes to quarterback recruiting for that game specifically, Penn State and Oregon, will be Elijah Haven, just as we talk about this today. That's going to do it for this Locked On crossover. Brian Smith, the recruiting expert for the Locked On Podcast Network, college football expert in general. He hosts The Portal, he hosts Locked On Seminoles, and is a guest on a variety of different shows. You'll find him all across the network. My name is Zach Seyko, your host of Locked On Nittany Lions. We do this daily. We talk about recruiting daily. We talk about Penn State sports daily. So subscribe to the individual YouTube channels to get that daily dose of general college football and college sports coverage. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Again, friendly reminder to let us know your thoughts down in the comment section. And Brian, thank you. I appreciate you always for these conversations. Can't wait to pick back up in a short amount of time with all the buzz that Penn State has between right now with these high profile matchups and recruiting as it continues to trend in the right direction for Penn State. So thank you for the time, as always.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.